For more on the Trump administration's foreign policy, we turn to Dan Senor. He was a senior advisor to Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan in the 2012 presidential campaign. Good to see you again.
Good morning, guys.
So, on the campaign trail, President Trump, when he was candidate Trump, repeatedly criticized NATO. He promoted an America First policy. He famously said NATO was obsolete. Yesterday, he said it was obsolete. It's not obsolete anymore. He's also characterized China as a currency manipulator. He seems to have taken a different approach as of yesterday. Is this, some people are painting this as flip-flopping, or is this, look, the people who voted for him sent somebody who is not a Washington insider, who doesn't have all that experience, and that's what they wanted, and he's realizing that this is a really big job, there's a lot of things going on, and perhaps taking a more measured tone and a measured approach is the way to go.
So there are two, what the administration is finding is the two most perplexing problems are what to do about Russia, right, because Russia poses a range of problems, and what to do about North Korea. The outgoing administration, the Obama administration, warned the incoming administration that one of the biggest problems you're going to have to deal with is North Korea. So he's just looking at the problems in front of him. And the tools he has at his disposal to deal with these problems. Take NATO, for instance. You mentioned NATO. Well, there's no bigger, I'd say no bigger. They're one of the biggest seeming threats to Putin in Putin's mind is a strong NATO. He wants a weak NATO. So Trump can now say, wait, I've got a problem with Putin, I've got a problem with Russia. NATO suddenly is a tool in my toolkit. I know I said they were obsolete before, but now they're actually of value to me because NATO and the expansion of NATO is a pressure point for Putin. So I can not only say that NATO's not obsolete, I will say that I support expanding NATO. Montenegro now, he's come out for expanding NATO, adding a 29th country to it. That is a pressure point on Putin. China. So it is very hard for this administration to resolve what I think is an emerging crisis in North Korea without China's help. Now, China in recent days has North Korea is mostly an import economy. It exports very little. But what it does export, it exports to China mostly. And in recent days, China started turning ships away of exports from North Korea. For the first time, for as long as I can remember, China turning away these ships, starting to put pressure, isolating North Korea. I don't think it's a coincidence that happened, and suddenly Trump says, okay, I'm going to reward that behavior. Suddenly I'm not going to talk up the currency manipulation issue. So you got to view all these things as tools in his toolkit, dealing with the crises that are in front of him. What is in front of him is what to do about Russia and what to do about North Korea.
Dan, you have said that President Trump appears to act in the moment and that his unpredictability can be helpful in diplomacy. How so with all of this on the table? Well,
for the entire 8 years of the Obama administration, President Obama tried to do a lot on the diplomatic track. I personally do not think he was very successful on much. Not a total failure, but on many of the things he tried to do, he was not successful. We're talking about Syria today. I mean, this much celebrated at the time deal where Russia was going to take all the chemical weapons out of Syria turns out to have been a failed diplomatic mission. One of the reasons his diplomacy failed is because very few actors in the world believed that the Obama administration would ever back up diplomacy with force. What we've seen in the last week is that Trump's unpredictability can actually, I believe, over time, help diplomacy. Again, he's got to stick with it. So we're only 100 days in here, so I don't want to ascribe too much to what has happened. But the reality is, if actors around the world believe that the Trump administration is willing to use force, they will be more inclined to engage a diplomatic track because they're worried about the alternative. So the threat or the possibility or the reality that force could be used becomes currency in diplomacy. We didn't have much of that during the Obama years. So far, we have a little of that. Again, I don't want to overstate it because it's early days, but I think that's how it can really enhance any kind of diplomatic track. I mean, just look at China. I mean, if China is in fact for the first time working with the United States on isolating North Korea, I don't think it's a coincidence that Trump surprised the world by taking action on Syria last week. And they say, wow, he's serious, he's unpredictable.
We didn't get a chance to talk about this the last time you were here. I want to ask you about Iran's role in Syria, because the way the headlines are coming out this week, it's Russia, it's Syria, it's the United States. Very few people reporting on what to do about Iran when it comes to Syria.
Yeah, so obviously the keys to Assad's survival are Russia, Hezbollah, and Iran, that troika. And I think that the administration has got to take a serious look at Iranian behavior, as it relates to the enforcement of this nuclear deal, which I think is going to become increasingly problematic. And B, the nuclear deal did not address all these other issues. Iran's support for terrorist proxies throughout the region, whether it's Yemen, whether it's in Iraq, whether it's support of Hezbollah, Iran's horrendous human rights violations inside the country, its domestic human rights violations. There's a range of issues the administration is going to have to deal with on Iran, not just the nuclear program. If you look at the players within the administration, people like H.R. McMaster has a very hardline view on Iran, the National Security Advisor. People like Jim Mattis basically left CENTCOM during the Obama years because he had such a strong difference with the Obama administration on Iran. He thought that they were being fantastically naive when it came to their the negotiations over the nuclear deal. So I think there are a lot of people around President Trump today who are in national security roles who genuinely believe that Iran is a real problem on a range of fronts, and I think you're going to start looking. There's a lot of things they could do to start unwinding parts of the Iran nuclear deal that Iran has benefited so much from to put more pressure on them.
But on Syria, the way to get if Bashar al-Assad has to go, then we're going to leave that to the Russians to convince Iran that he has to go?
No, we're going to have to convince the Russians that Assad is now a liability for Putin. That's part of what they're basically saying. Mm-hmm. There's been no cost to Putin for standing by Assad over these years, and
right.
now starting to say, okay, now there's a cost. Okay, mm-hmm. we're building up. We're going to support expansion of NATO. We may look at more sanctions against Russia. We may. I mean, they're saying some pretty aggressive things. Putin, the Russian government may have been aware that Assad was launching his chemical attack. So part of it is making Assad a liability for Putin. But it's also, I agree, it's also going to have to be about tackling Russia, tackling the Iranian government in some way, because the Iranian government is helping to prop them up. And so I think they're going to look at ways to put pressure on Iran. It's clear this administration wants Assad to go. Right. Once you make that decision, the last administration was not committed to that principle. There was disagreement within the administration on that point. Now that it's a policy objective of this administration, there's a range of things that could be done to start making it difficult for these various allies of Assad to stand by Assad.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there.
Dan Senor, as always, thank you, my friend.
Thanks.
Good to see you.
Thanks.